Daniel had never known much about his great-uncle, just the occasional story whispered by his parents and a single photograph of the man standing before a grand mansion deep in the woods. When he received the news that he had inherited that very mansion, curiosity overwhelmed him. He decided to spend a week there, hoping to uncover some family history and perhaps consider renovations. He arrived late in the afternoon, the mansion standing tall and ominous against the dusky sky. The old mansion exuded an eerie charm. Ivy crept up its walls, and the windows, coated in dust and grime, reflected the dim light in a ghostly haze. The key turned with a loud, echoing click, and the heavy front door creaked open, revealing a dark, dusty foyer. The air inside was thick and musty, as if it hadn't been disturbed for decades. Daniel felt a shiver run down his spine as he stepped inside. That first evening, as he unpacked his belongings and settled into a grand but aged bedroom, he heard faint whispers. He paused, straining to hear, but the sound vanished as quickly as it had come. Dismissing it as the house settling, he turned in for the night, but his sleep was restless. The old house groaned and creaked, footsteps echoed faintly down the hall, and the whispers returned, closer this time, as if they were just outside his door. Daniel's unease grew, but exhaustion eventually pulled him into a fitful sleep. The next day, Daniel began to explore the mansion. He wandered through rooms filled with antiques covered in dust and cobwebs. Each room seemed to tell a story of its own, but one discovery in the attic chilled him to the bone. There, in a corner, he found a collection of old journals, their leather covers worn and pages yellowed with age. As he leafed through them, he discovered detailed accounts of his great-uncle's life and, more disturbingly, his involvement in occult practices. The journals spoke of rituals and strange occurrences, of attempts to summon spirits and entities from another realm. Daniel's curiosity turned to dread as he read about the horrors that had plagued the mansion. That night, the house seemed to come alive. Whispers grew louder, doors creaked open and shut on their own, and objects moved as if guided by unseen hands. Shadows flickered at the edges of his vision, and the sense of being watched was inescapable. When he finally managed to fall asleep, his dreams were filled with dark figures and ghostly apparitions. He awoke in a cold sweat, his heart pounding. Determined to get to the bottom of the mystery, Daniel continued his exploration. In a hidden room behind a bookcase, he discovered bizarre symbols and artifacts used in his great-uncle's rituals. Among the eerie relics stood an old, ornate mirror. As Daniel gazed into it, he felt a chill. His reflection stared back at him with a sinister smile that twisted his features into a grotesque mask. The reflection moved independently, mocking him with its malevolent grin. Terrified, Daniel stumbled back and fled the room, but the feeling of being watched persisted. The days blurred together in a haze of fear and confusion. Daniel's isolation began to take a toll on his sanity. Ghostly apparitions appeared more frequently, often taking the form of his great-uncle and other unknown figures. They seemed to be warning him or trying to communicate, but their presence filled him with dread. The atmosphere in the mansion grew increasingly oppressive, and Daniel felt a constant, malevolent presence watching him. One evening, as he lay in bed, a figure appeared at the foot of his bed. It was a woman, her long, dark hair matted and hanging over her face. Her eyes were hollow, and her mouth was twisted into a grotesque grin. She wore a tattered white dress stained with blood, and her bony fingers reached out toward him. Daniel froze in terror as she whispered his name, her voice a chilling, raspy hiss. He blinked, and she was gone. The next day, Daniel discovered a hidden chamber in the basement. In the center of the room was a large, ancient book on a pedestal. The book contained detailed descriptions of the rituals his great-uncle performed, including one final, unfinished ritual meant to open a permanent gateway to the other realm. As Daniel read, a horrifying realization dawned on him. The ritual required a blood sacrifice, and his presence in the mansion might be part of the ritual's completion. That night, as Daniel showered, the bathroom lights flickered and went out, plunging him into darkness. The door locked with a loud click, and the tap water turned on, filling the room with a sound of rushing water. He heard the woman's voice, a low, eerie whisper, coming from behind him. When he turned around, she was there, her face inches from his, her breath icy on his skin. He screamed and backed away, but she disappeared as quickly as she had appeared, leaving him trembling in fear. Daniel's nightmares became more vivid and terrifying. He dreamed of being hunted by shadowy figures and monstrous entities, their eyes glowing with malevolent intent. These nightmares started to blur with reality, and he found himself waking up in different parts of the mansion with no memory of how he got there. The lines between dream and reality became increasingly blurred, driving Daniel to the brink of madness. One evening, the ghostly woman appeared again, this time in the living room. She stood in the corner, her eyes fixed on him with a predatory gaze. As he tried to escape, the walls seemed to close in on him, and the room grew colder. She followed him, her movements slow and deliberate, her whispers growing louder and more insistent. When he finally broke free, he found himself standing outside, the cold night air biting into his skin. Desperate to escape, Daniel tried to leave the mansion, but every time he approached the front door, he felt an inexplicable force drawing him back, as if the house itself wouldn't let him go. In a last-ditch effort, he ventured into the basement one final time, determined to destroy the book and break the ritual's hold on him. As he entered the hidden chamber, the ghostly woman appeared once more, her presence more menacing than ever. The room grew darker and the temperature dropped. Daniel could see his breath in the air as he approached the book. The woman's whispers filled his ears, urging him to stop. But he pressed on, determined to end the nightmare. With a final burst of strength, he grabbed the book and tore it apart, the pages fluttering to the ground like dead leaves. The room shook, and a deafening roar filled the air. The ghostly woman screamed, her form dissolving into a wisp of smoke. The mansion seemed to shudder, and then everything went still. Daniel collapsed to the floor, exhausted and terrified. He had broken the ritual, but the experience had left him deeply scarred. As he stumbled out of the mansion and into the cold night, he knew that he would never be the same. The memories of his time in the mansion would haunt him forever, and he would always look over his shoulder, fearing that the entities he had encountered would one day return. The tale of Daniel's inheritance is one of terror and survival, a chilling reminder of the horrors that can lurk in the darkest corners of our world. As you listen to his story, remember to keep the lights on and the doors locked, for you never know what might be watching from the shadows.